I'm Mariana Hirsch, and I'm the president of the Modern Language Association. Today, we are inaugurating our 2014 convention in the city of Chicago, and we have the great fortune to be able to precede our meeting with this wonderful Chicago Humanities Summit. The Modern Language Association is just thrilled to be co-sponsoring the summit with the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and with the Chicago Humanities Festival on the occasion of the publication of the Heart of the Matter report. My job is to welcome you this morning. We're looking forward to a very lively morning of workshops, discussions, how-to sessions that will, I believe, start something around the country, since we're bringing about 7,000 members, MLA members, to Chicago, and I think our discussions today will reach far beyond this room and this building. I'd like to thank the following co-sponsors for their generosity in making this morning possible: the Franke Institute for the Humanities at the University of Chicago, the Alice Kaplan Institute for the Humanities at Northwestern University, the Illinois Program for Research in the Humanities at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, the Center for the Humanities at the University of Wisconsin at Madison, and the Obermann Center for Advanced Studies at the University of Iowa. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a wonderful morning.
My name's Don Randall. I'm the chairman of the board of directors of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and in that capacity I'd like to add my welcome to all of you and to say what an important collaboration this is among the three entities that are sponsoring this morning's event. The publication of The Heart of the Matter was, in part at least, an attempt to claim some space in what we would probably all agree is an impoverished national dialogue. Read by close students of texts, it would be bound to provoke some amount of positive comment and some amount of complaint. I think of someone known to you all whose initials are SF, who was, of course, entirely predicted to find fault with it. Well, as the Spaniards say, what's important is that people should speak about you, even if they insist on saying something good. So part of what we're about here is to get more people to talk about the humanities and then to do something about them. We've talked a lot in this country about crumbling infrastructure. Well, it's our intellectual infrastructure that is at grave risk for want of public investment and commitment to it. And the intellectual infrastructure that the humanities and the arts and the social sciences represent is crucially important, not only to the welfare of the country in terms of gross domestic product and national defense, but also in terms of the spirit of the nation and the quality of its democracy. We are often challenged to think about impacts and outcomes, and we are much in the thrall of anything that can be quantified and supported by big data. So in that context, I would like to remind you of the words of a very great economist who was also a great humanist. That's John Maynard Keynes. And in his general theory, he writes, "The statement that Victoria was a better queen than Elizabeth, if not necessarily a happier woman, is a statement not without meaning and not without interest, but not as suitable material for the differential calculus. Many of the things that we are about here are not suitable material for the differential calculus, but they remain absolutely fundamental to what it means to be a human being." And so for all of you in this room, and one hopes many, many others not here this morning, the effort to talk more about the humanities and get more people to pay attention and to give attention to this part of our intellectual infrastructure is absolutely crucial. Strength to the arms of you all in this endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you, Don, and thank you, Marianne, and thanks to the Chicago Humanities Festival for organizing this summit and also to Fourth Presbyterian Church for hosting us this morning in this beautiful space. It's nice to see so many arms of strength gathered here together and for the MLA, because we do have a lot of work to do. My name is Allison Cuddy, and I have to confess, I am a recovering academic. It's been 10 years since I formally pursued an advanced degree in the humanities, but I like to think that every day I've relapsed into the humanities and academics as a reporter and a host and a producer at Chicago's public radio station, WBEZ. So I'm very excited to be here among all of you and excited to take the advice in the heart of the matter, a copy of which you'll find on your seats if you haven't already, and sort of think about what we can do to bring the humanities to a wider public. And so we've brought together some of the authors of this report who did good work in coming up with ways of thinking about how to make the humanities more relevant and more valued in public life. And let me introduce them now. In the middle, Richard Brodhead, who is a scholar of 19th century American literature and the president of Duke University, and is co-chair of the American Academy of Art and Sciences Commission on the Humanities and Social Sciences. Good morning.
Good morning.
To his left, the Honorable Diane Wood. She's the Chief Judge of the United States Court of Appeals of the Seventh Circuit, a senior lecturer at the University of Chicago Law School, and a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences Commission on the Humanities and Social Sciences. Good morning, Judge Wood. And then to my left, John Rowe, who is former chairman and CEO of the Exelon Corporation and co-chair, along with Richard Brodhead, of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences Commission on the Humanities and Social Sciences. Good morning, John. So the report is fascinating and suggests that the humanities, as we can all agree, are incredibly important in terms of creating good citizens, of advancing our workforce, even of securing national security. But peppered throughout the recommendations is this idea that what we need to do is engage the public with the humanities to elevate the profile of the humanities. And that's where I wanted to start the conversation by asking, of all the things that you could do, what one thing would you do to improve or elevate the public profile of the humanities? And John, why don't you start us off?
Well, for me, that's an individual decision that every one of us makes every day, and most of the people in this room are doing it. When I leave this room, I'll go down to my office for an hour and then out on West Chicago Avenue, where I teach Muslim history to African American and Latino teenagers. And someone said, "Are you competent to do that?" And I said, "Probably not, but I'm competent to stay ahead of them." And for me, the single most important thing we do is to work with young people, not because they lack culture. That's an arrogant statement that's imbecilic. But because they need more forms of exposure to these kinds of things, and they need examples. But, you know, when I finish doing that, I'll be off to the Field Museum, which I chair. I mean, to me, everybody here is involved in a dozen things that advance these causes. The trick is just to keep doing it, to put your time in them, to put your money in them. Don Randall likes to tease me because my wife and I sponsor a chair in Byzantine history at the University of Wisconsin. Well, we also have one in classical Greek too. We're getting more broad in our interest, Don. The next one they want is in American political and economic history. And meanwhile, his colleagues want one in Persia. So there are ample opportunities. You really don't have to hunt very hard. You just have to go and do.
Richard, what would you add to that, or what would you say?
Yeah, I would only say two things about this meeting so far. One, you must stop talking about the humanities as an illness. from which you were trying to recover, and two, what an extreme disadvantage John and I are at the fact that we're not called honorable when we're introduced. We are not, as far as I know, dishonorable. It's just not something that's commented on. I completely agree with John's main point, which is if you're not working at the early levels of education, you're not building people who are potential audiences for the humanities in the future. You're not building people who have the equipment of literacy, the equipment of curiosity, the equipment of knowledge, and that's a national tragedy. At the same time, I think what John said second is the main point. I think we concluded not with the view that the humanities are an extraordinarily arcane preference that it's going to be very difficult to persuade people to like. The world doesn't know the word humanities, the world doesn't know the word liberal arts, but the world knows music, it knows film, it knows the pleasures of expression, it knows the pleasures of argumentation. People even know the pleasures of learning the history of things they take for granted. So if we thought of the humanities as a set of activities or a set of human powers rather than of academic disciplines, the truth is that the problem isn't that the public doesn't care about these things, is that our culture hasn't done much to remind the public that it does care about these things or that they continue to need investment. Now, the main difference between the humanities and the sciences are, if you want to support the sciences, at some point you really have to be focused on the Senate and House Appropriations Committee and the way they fund the NIH, the NSF, and other research organizations. But the federal funding for the humanities, with effects that I think are bad but also good, we're not primarily a stepchild of the federal government. What we are talking about has to be something that takes place in community after community, and that means that the effort to promote this cause has to take the form of everyone who cares about it finding ways not to sit around in the corner of other people who agree with you and complain about the Philistine world, but to figure out what audiences there might be you can reach out into and establish your interest in. Many of us teach literature, prose. These are arts of persuasion, but humanists have not always been very good persuaders because persuasion doesn't consist of saying what is true and then blaming somebody for not agreeing with you. Persuasion takes the form of finding the different thing they think within which you can establish the truth or interest of what you think and then open up a dialogue. And I think that's really what we hope. It's not that we think we've come up with the last word in the way to advance the humanities. We've wanted to kick off an invitation to ingenuity of people to find out what publics could you get out and get in touch with, and what arguments or means could you find to revive the interest that is already latent.
And Judge Wood, how would you go about taking that charge yourself, or asking people to take that charge?
Well, I guess I begin with the thought that people have been concerned that the humanities have been relegated to a lower position than they should hold in our educational structures and thus later on in our society. So if a public school has a tight budget, are they going to cut the music and art programs, or perhaps even advanced history classes or the like? When young people are fortunate enough to go to college of some kind, are they going to feel comfortable taking a course in Shakespeare, or do they feel that they've got to take all of their courses in computer science? And I think there's a myth abroad that you're not going to be able to succeed in the practical world of today if you indulge in this field that we call the humanities. I agree with Dick very much that it's not that people need to be persuaded that the humanities are attractive, important, enriching, in any other way, very good. I think people do think that. Look what happens in Chicago. Every time there's a free concert, there are free plays, there are opportunities for the public to come enjoy things that would loosely fall under the humanities. Thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people attend these things every year. But when it comes to making choices, there's a sense that it's almost a luxury we can't afford. So I would urge us to go back to the facts, go back to the data about where the jobs really are. Yes, there are IT jobs, but there are thousands of jobs in our country that require the ability to communicate. There are thousands of jobs that require the ability to be creative.
look, you can even go to law school and need to be able to understand the perspectives of a wide variety of people. And how do you do that? You learn about their culture, you learn about their language, you learn about what makes them tick, you read things that they've written. So I really think just some correction of the factual record is one of the first and most important steps we can take. I entirely agree that the focus at some level needs to be on young people, but it also needs to be on their parents, and it also needs to be on the communities in which they live, both the immediate communities and the states and the national community, because those are the ones who are funding the opportunities that are available for the children. Those are the ones that are helping to set the direction. One of the things that we discussed frequently in the commission, in fact, I'll end with this, is the increasingly global nature of the world. We all say that, we all know books like The World is Flat, we know all of this, but it's actually true. Our children are experiencing encounters with people from other countries and other cultures on a much more regular basis than we, their parents or their grandparents did, and that, in my view, is only going to accelerate, and the only way American children will manage that successfully is with a broad-based background.
You know, it's interesting. So all of you agree, and I think all of us in this room would agree, the humanities are important. We love the humanities. We go to concerts, we love books and films and art, and we appreciate and value them. But there is a way, in your comments point us there, Judge Wood, that the humanities are in this other sphere of life. They're not in the places where we think important decisions are being made. They're not in the corridors of power in government. They're in libraries, in museums. And I wonder how you would go about making the humanities more a part of that decision-making process, more a part of where these kinds of things get sorted out. So they're not just something waiting for the crumbs to fall off the table, but are actually helping to sort of establish what will be given out. So how would you...
Could I just say, I mean, what I meant to say is I think they're already there in the corridors of power.
Or should be.
And, well, they certainly should be, but I think they really are already there to a great extent. And it's really truth in advertising that we need. We need people to realize that when they are making decisions, whether it's decisions about where we're going to give foreign aid, or decisions about who we're going to make war on, or decisions about a company deciding, you know, we think our product is going to sell well in Mexico as well as the United States, or maybe we can collaborate with some medical researchers in Brazil who are looking at the same thing we're looking at. I think so many of those decisions, maybe all of them, are infused with humanistic inputs.
Well, and again, the funny thing is, you know, the members of our commission, there were 53 of us, we really basically didn't know each other. I'd never met you, you before, and it took us a while to reach the high level of consensus that is now on display in front of you. And it's not that we present groupthink as an ideal, but nevertheless, you know, we know the humanities as I and as we conceive of them are everyday activities. They're rooted in everyday powers, everyday pleasures, everyday needs. But we know we live in a culture that has for generations conceptualized them as falling within the domain of leisure, within the domain of optional, within the domain of ornamental. Read Santayana. This is already all laid out in the book, The Gentile Tradition. And that's why in moments like since the recession, well, sure, I'd love my kid to be able to study the humanities, but we can't afford to let them do something so wasteful, so idle, so leisured. And it seems to me the way you counter that is not by saying, after all, leisure is itself important, but that these activities do contribute to everything that is done. A member of our commission, and I draw attention to him, Carl Eikenberry, who's in this room this morning, was in charge of military efforts in Afghanistan and then diplomatic efforts. You hear him talk about the advantages or disadvantages of having a foreign policy that understands cultural difference, that understands intercultural difference, linguistic difference, things of this sort. These are not after-the-fact things that a few smart people go to the library to study. If you haven't studied them in advance, it's going to have consequences. Another Chicago person who was on our commission was Jim McNerney, the CEO of Boeing. Boeing is not known to the general public as a bastion of the humanities, but he agreed to be on the commission, and he said in his organization, you can get a job if you're an engineer, but you can't rise above a certain level unless you have communication skills and intercultural listening and communication skills. These, of course, are the humanities. And so we've just got to remind people we're not talking about something precious and rare. We're talking about something that is the basis of every activity of every degree of importance in our culture.
It seems to me some of these things are almost painfully obvious. The field has a lovely exhibit right now on the Lascaux cave paintings. One didn't have to teach those folks about the mysteries of art and what they had to do with human expression. And as somebody who spent his life dealing with government running utilities, the relevance of Pepys' diaries and the court of Charles II has been obvious to me every day. What the Republicans, my colleagues, like to call the Chicago way in terms of the Obama administration was in fact the way of Charles Stewart, and that also can be said of the Bush administration. These arts of what goes on are not novel. What troubles me is not making them relevant to the so-called normal person, the Philistine, if you will. I love Dick's use of that phrase. If you want to deal with Philistines, presumably you should know one. And as Dick was making the point, he was saying, you have to reach out and find out, and then you may find that those Philistines know something about culture too. It's just a somewhat different perspective than yours. What really haunts me about the discussion we've drifted into is, again, working with teenagers in a charter school. On the one hand, these kids want, they are interested in, they are willing to know, indeed almost eager to know, about many different kinds of things that we call the humanities. Of course, each one of them has his or her own priorities, but so do I. The issue is not eagerness to know. The issue is how we help them build an educational program that allows them the benefits of the humanities and also directs them toward productive employment at the same time. It's a point Don Randall made last night. They need to do both. And for the children of many, perhaps all in this room, yes, we can afford to say, do the liberal arts first and then find your career, because somehow we'll protect them while they do it. But my kids in our school don't have those protectors, except me, or my wife, who's a better protector. And so the issue for me is how to help them incorporate the humanities and social sciences into what they're doing, but also develop a plan that leads to some sort of career, because they don't have the safety nets that more wealthy kids do. It's not either or, it's how to put the two things together.
We're just about out of time.
That went fast.
Yeah, as you said earlier, Richard, we are going to sort of think about the humanities as powers, as tools for being in the world, and so we have a series of how-to sessions scheduled to start in just a few minutes. So maybe you could just leave us, all of you, with one brief thought. I mean, obviously, you put a lot of passion and energy into the report, but into your thinking about the humanities and their relevance and importance and how they can be useful in the world. And I just would like to hear from you very briefly each, what motivates you to do this work? Given all you have to do other, what is the motivation for you?
You're starting with me?
Yeah, I'll start with you.
Well, I'm sorry. I was born to
You
this.
could,
I was born to this work. The only thing I ever wanted to be in my life was a teacher, and the only kind of teacher I ever wanted to be was a teacher of the humanities. And really, I've gone on to other careers, but they're all rooted in that one.
Right.
And anyone who thinks you can do the job of university leadership without understanding a lot of the things we've been talking about needs remedial education.
Or to tangle with Stephen Colbert, which you did very well.
But what not everybody remembers is that Stephen Colbert was a philosophy major and
Right.
then a theater major.
Judge Wood, I mean, you did start out in the humanities as well, in the English department.
Yes, I did. I started out as an English major and came within a hair of
doing graduate work in comparative literature, and then I suddenly decided to go to law school instead because I was interested in a career that involved greater engagement with what I'll call the real world, you know, the down and dirty of everyday life. And I found that law was an amazing mixture of efforts by people to organize themselves in societies and to make life work on a day-to-day basis. And you can think of that as high a theoretical level as you want. And the immediate problems that they have. And I realized, too, that the humanities was going to suffuse everything. Every decision I make involves somehow something that's happened to people, whether it's a violent thing or whether it's just a commercial deal that went bad or whether it's some regulatory problem. And I learn constantly about the world as a whole through many sources, through literature, through factual things. And I know that this engagement in the humanities is helpful. I really think of this report actually as simply the necessary complement to the science, technology, engineering, math, the so-called STEM report that the American Academy did years ago. Neither one of these will stand on its own. We need two legs, not one. And I think our report really, in the end, I will be happy if it reminds people that it's an all of the above correct answer, not one or the other.
John Rowe.
Well, I'm a utility executive by trade, a lawyer by profession, and a historian in terms of how I think about the world. One of my favorite people, an economist, once tried to compliment me by saying, "John, you think like an economist." Well, it was gracious of him, but no, I don't. I think like a historian. To me, it's history that provides the context of who we are and what we do, and it's how I think about things. It's what comes easily to me. But in the end, it's probably about avoiding boredom. I'm a very easily bored person, and I need all those things going on. I need to be interested in them to feel alive. Otherwise, I would just eat.
Well, on that note, John Rowe, Richard Brodhead, and Judge Diane Wood, thank you very, very much.